Hello there, my name is Brady, and I'm a graphic designer. This is baseball. Due to the simplicity of its rules, baseball is so tied to American culture that it's known unofficially as America's pastime. Although it's as American as apple pie and a $960 billion defense budget, baseball also is quite popular in Southeastern Asian countries like Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. As a result of this, baseball takes center stage, or center field, in many anime. Like a lot of them, actually. Major, Ace of Diamonds, Mix, Princess Nine, Catch Me at the Ballpark, Taisho Baseball Girls, Cinderella Nine, Oblivion Battery, Big Wind Up, Tribe Nine, Gurazeni, and One Outs. Just to name 13 or so. All of this doesn't even begin to mention the amount of baseball-themed manga that haven't been serialized into anime, which I'm not going to be talking about today, regrettably. I just don't have the time. There are so many. Other than Harukaze Mound, because that's my goat. It was axed recently at the time of recording this. Don't be confused though. I'm not here to talk about entire shows dedicated to baseball. I'm much more interested in a more eccentric and niche televised baseball phenomenon. Single episodes that put baseball front and center in shows that have nothing to do with the sport. We're talking Steven Universe baseball episode, Jujutsu Kaisen baseball episode, The Simpsons, Arrested Development, Dragon Ball Super, the original Pokemon anime, baseball episodes, in all of them, for some reason. I don't know why that reason is. While they aren't all great as episodes of the shows that they're part of, I think that these baseball episodes have to serve an important purpose to warrant being such a common thing. And I intend to figure out what that purpose is. To do this, I have to do some research though, so I'm going to hit the books. I'll be back in a few days. For you, it'll be a second though. I've spent the last few days scouring a sacred text as holy as it is mysterious, absorbing all of its secrets. For research, I did what I assume the writer's room of every show does in order to accurately portray the ball game for their respective television programs. I read every one of the 192 pages in the official 2025 MLB Rulebook to learn everything I could about the actual specifications of the game. This was the best way I could think of to learn the game as it's meant to be played and immerse myself in the rules and regulations associated with it, which was a challenge for me because I don't have a ton of experience with baseball, so I learned a lot here. Here's the thing though, with all of that learning and the hours of reading it took, I've kind of begun to think that TV writers did some pretty serious skimming instead of fully reading all of the rules. For example, you're not allowed to make attempts at injuring base runners, but Champa does it several times without ever being so much as warned about ejection by the umpires, who are shown to have the rulebooks on them at all times, which they're supposed to as umpires. Like, I understand there's not a specific rule for it, but like 703A2 or 604A1, like, please just give him some kind of warning. I understand that it's foolish to attempt to apply the rules of the MLB to powerful cosmic beings like Gods of Destruction, Satoru Gojo, and Miss Frizzle. But also, the game has rules for a reason, and you're beholden to those rules regardless of your race, age, gender identity, or ability to transform parts of your body in animalistic ways. Being a beastman or super genius or dinosaur does not exempt you from the rules. So, today I'm going to talk about every rule subsection violated in these baseball episodes.
Rule 1.
Rule 1 just has to do with the objectives of the game, so none of the shows violate any of its subsections. In Rule 1 compliance, I'm choosing to overlook situations like Blurns Ball and Sniffle Ball, which intentionally modify the base objectives of the game, since I think it's unfair to penalize shows for iterating on the game. Iteration is the driving force of progress, and I refuse to stifle individuals' abilities in attempting to better the game.
Rule 2.
Rule 2 has to do with the field setup, which most shows are faithful to. Only Chowder violates any of Rule 2.01, which specifies that the infield has to be a 90-foot square, created from home plate and the 3 bases. Sniffleball has 13 bases, and a lot of them break out of the quadrilateral diamond that the MLB requires. Every other show has 4 bases, though, so I'm choosing to believe that they're all 90-foot squares. This faith and belief cannot help when it comes to the pitcher's mound slopes, though. The pitcher's mound slope specifications of 2.04 get a lot of shows into trouble. The mound has to exist with a slope of 1 foot to 1 inch after a 6-inch gap from the rubber, so that every foot from the rubber, ignoring the 6-inch gap, uniformly lowers 1 inch until it reaches the level of the infield. It should not be round or a parabola. The backside of the mound, aka the rear slope, doesn't have to follow this 1-to-1 rule, only being described as gradual to circle edge. Steven is not allowed to pitch from atop a crashed spaceship, specifically because it's a round spaceship, and there's no rubber to push off. Violation. Here's the good news. That's already 2 out of the 9 rules down, and only a few violations, so we're really not doing too badly here.
Rule 3.
Rule 3 has to do with equipment and uniforms. And this is a direct quote, so get ready for this. Rule 3.01. The ball shall be a sphere formed by yarn wound around a small core of cork, rubber, or similar material, covered with 2 strips of white horsehide or cowhide, tightly stitched together. It shall weigh not less than 5 nor more than 5 1/4 ounces of voir du pas, and measure not less than 9 nor more than 9 1/4 inches in circumference. No player shall intentionally discolor or damage the ball by rubbing it with soil, rosin, paraffin, licorice, sandpaper, emery paper, or other foreign substance. And that's not even including the prescribed penalty section. Chowder yet again is under fire, since the sniffle ball is made entirely of the pitcher's snot, and therefore is meeting none of the 3.01 requirements. Obviously. However, since this rule specifically was violated by the pitcher, who is the one hocking the loogie into their hands to pitch, it's additionally a breach of Rule 6.02, subsection C. So Chowder's still violating 3.01, but is also violating a pitching rule here too, which, don't worry, we're going to get to that. Also, the problem here is that the umpire-in-chief Gazpacho is probably getting in trouble with the office of the commissioner for this whole situation, because he didn't ensure there were ample regulation balls ready before the game started. So we've got a 3.01 violation, a 6.02C violation, and a 4.01E1 violation. I hope you're beginning to understand what I went through making this video. This is just the beginning. There are issues here, obviously, with the game's organizers, its players, its pitcher, and Futurama's Blurns Ball and Grey's Anatomy's softball game is a similar story. I'm going to ignore the fact that the Blurns Ball is tied to a string, but both of these shows have a yellow ball. It needs to be white. It can't be yellow. Violation. The most unique violator of this rule was Scooby-Doo, specifically What's New, Scooby-Doo, when the ghost of Cab Craig discolored balls by soaking them in kerosene.
Wait a minute, guys. Those aren't pickles, they're baseballs.
And also lighting them on fire, which I'm saying falls into this rule because it wasn't mentioned elsewhere in the rulebook, but you're definitely not allowed to do that. Violation. Rule 3.02 pertains to bats, which should be one piece of solid wood no longer than 42 inches and with a diameter that does not exceed 2.61 inches at its widest point. However, aluminum bats are allowed in the minor leagues as long as they are uncolored. So for the sake of brevity, I'm going to assume that most of these shows are minor league games, unless they specifically say otherwise. This is only relevant for a couple rules, specifically this and helmets. Even with the minor league ruling, though, you still can't use a colored aluminum bat, and you definitely can't use an entire tree trunk as a bat. So there are still some violators for 3.02. 3.03 has to do with player uniforms, which should all be identical in color, trim, and style. This goes as far as to apply to the length of sleeves and the color of undershirts and pants, as well as socks. Needless to say, a lot of shows get in trouble with these. 3.04 to 7 all have to do with fielders' gloves, though, which, good news, not very many shows are going to get in trouble for. Most of them are doing it correctly. One thing I do want to specify in relation to the gloves, though, is that there is no rule requiring players to wear a glove in any position on the field. So shows that have players sans gloves are not violating these rules. 3.08's helmets, though, are not optional. In major leagues, every player is required to wear either a single or double ear flap helmet. Minor league players have to wear a double ear flap helmet. I don't care how good Meredith Grey is at being a surgeon, she needs 2 ear flaps. She is not a major league player. Catchers also are required to wear both a helmet and a mask while catching. You cannot do one or the other. You definitely can't do neither. So many of them violate helmet rules. It's the most violated rule. More shows cannot get helmets right than anything else, which is insane because helmets are so easy, man. Just put on a double ear flap helmet and keep it on while you run the bases. Children's shows cannot get their characters to wear a helmet. Arthur does not wear a helmet. PBS, what are we doing? He needs a helmet, and he needs a double ear flap helmet specifically, and he needs to wear it while he hits and while he runs the bases. He's going out there with no protection on his head. What if he gets hit in the head? It happens. Just wear the goddamn helmet. It doesn't matter that you didn't want to come to school today, Arnold. You need a double ear flap helmet.
Something tells me I should have stayed home today.
Guys, can we please just wear the helmets? Everyone needs to wear one. Jimmy Neutron, you're a smart kid. You think maybe putting on a double ear flap helmet would be a good idea? Let's protect that big, beautiful brain of yours, King.
Rule 4.
Rule 4 has to do with umpire regulations, batting order, hitting lineups, and weather conditions, and is largely irrelevant. A few shows violate Rule 4.03a and b since they change who's on their team during the game. Otherwise, though, most of Rule 4 is either followed or not shown on screen. However, 4.06 specifies that no fraternization between players of opposing teams is allowed. Many shows violated this rule. Like, most of them. It's helmets and talking to the other team. I don't know why we can't figure that out.
Rule 5.
Rule 5 has to do with playing the game and mentions fielders' positioning, as well as batting, base running, what constitutes an out, substitutions, pitching form, and timeouts. Rule 5 is easily the most wide-reaching rule of the game and has so many nuances that I genuinely cannot describe each and every violation without this video being several hours longer than it already is kind of shaping up to be. Therefore, we're going to do kind of a quick version of Rule 5. I'm just going to kind of put some footage of people violating the rules on the screen, and I'm going to just read the rules as written. So, no jokes here, nothing fun. We're just going to kind of get through them.
Let's just get it done and eat the shit. Get it done. That's what I want to do. I just want to get it done.
Batters have to keep 1 foot in the batter's box for their time at bat, unless meeting exceptions in 504A 1 through 9 or 504B 1 through 3. Every runner gets to move 1 base without liability to be put out if a fielder catches a fly ball but then falls or steps into any area that is out of play. Every runner advances 3 bases without liability to be put out if a fielder deliberately touches a fair ball with his cap, mask, or any part of his uniform detached from its proper place on his person. Pitchers must deliver the ball in one of 2 positions, either utilizing the wind-up position or set position. A runner is out if, after touching first base, they leave the base path, clearly abandoning any effort to touch the next base. Runners are out on appeal if they touch bases in the correct order, because whether it's a result of missing a base or not, they are still out on appeal. These 2 are connected. Those 6 violations don't seem like much, but Rule 5 takes up pages 18 through 66 of the rulebook. So, there are so many subsections and exceptions to the Rule 5 violations. It's wild. Baseball truly is a bureaucratic hellscape in a way that I would never have guessed when I came up with the idea for this video. Why are there so many goddamn subsections, guys?
Rule 6.
Rule 6 has to do with illegal actions and misconduct, which is where shows really start to take liberties. 6.01 mentions interference and obstruction, which have to do with players getting in each other's way, largely under the guise of being called safe or out.
Mr. Spoon, what interference for me? My eye!
Interference has to do with any action that impedes other players' ability to play the game. Sometimes interference is done by base runners, sometimes it's a fielder's violation, and sometimes it applies to umpires, spectators, or base coaches. Obstruction is a word for a specific form of interference, which is inflicted onto base runners by blocking their base paths and or bases. One important thing to note, though, is that fielders have the right of way whenever they are in the act of fielding a ball or in the act of receiving a throw, which specifically means that they're about to catch the ball and the ball's already in the air. You can't obstruct a runner's base path if the ball hasn't been thrown yet. Rule 6.02c is where many shows get into hot water since it specifies actions that pitchers are not allowed to take. Almost all baseball shows have a show's protagonist as either the pitcher or the catcher. So these kind of come up a lot just because they get a lot of screen time because the protagonist is in the roles pretty often. 602c mentions that pitchers cannot rub the ball on their gloves, clothes, or skin, apply foreign substances of any kind to the ball, deface the ball in any manner, pitch any ball altered in the 3 ways that I've just mentioned, or have on their person or in their possession any foreign substance. And you may be thinking, what is a foreign substance? Don't worry, there's a comment on 602c7 that specifically outlines that bracelets, tape, band-aids, and glue are considered foreign materials that are not allowed. In light of this, I would say that sticky spheres plucked off of the pitcher's head count as a foreign substance. Snot is also a foreign substance. Though both of these materials come from the disgusting bodies of 2 little freak pitchers, they're still not allowed. The prescribed penalty for violating any of these pitching-related rules is ejecting the pitcher from the game and automatically suspending them. However, in the case of Mineta Minoru and Gorgonzola the Zinger, I believe that life in prison is a more fitting penalty. Now we arrive at 602c9, which is a favorite for shows to break. Pitchers are not allowed to intentionally pitch at the batter. Specifically, these pitchers should not be hitting batters in the head. This is word for word. To pitch at a batter's head is unsportsmanlike and highly dangerous. It should be, and is, condemned by everybody. Umpires should act without hesitation in enforcement of this rule. Teammates of the pitcher should not be celebrating a pitcher hitting a batter in the head. Teammates of the batter should also not be celebrating it. And Satoru Gojo should have, as umpire-in-chief, immediately silenced the good pitch comments and thrown Maki out of the game. She needs to be ejected from the game. It's dangerous, and Scruffy and the MLB umpires should have also stopped Leela's beaning spree. And there was the umpire who didn't stop Mugen either. These are instances of a single pitcher just beaning runner after runner. It's completely unacceptable play. Someone's going to get their skull fractured at this rate, because we already know they're not wearing helmets. Just wear the goddamn helmet. What's to protect them? But this rule, and we're not following this rule either. Rule 6.03 has to do with illegal actions for batters to take. 6.03a1 says that you cannot hit the ball while one or both of your feet are outside of the batter's box. You're out whether the ball goes foul or fair. 6.03a5 puts out any batter that uses a tampered with bat. This rule specifically has to do with bats altered to improve distance hit. However, I'm also going to say that any characters who are using shotgun bats are violating this rule because that's clearly a tampered with bat. I don't think you're that strong. I'm sorry. You're not so strong that you're breaking the bat and throwing shards at the pitcher. It's not realistic. 6.03b1 has to do with batting out of turn, which is an appeal-based out. Therefore, I am going to highlight all the shows who violated this rule, but the blame for the violations going unnoticed should really be falling on the opposing team's manager for not calling out the violation. It's an appeal-based out. The umpire is not going to call the out on his own. You have to appeal for it. 6.04 is all about unsportsmanlike conduct. You cannot incite spectators, verbally harass anyone while playing the game, or make intentional contact with the umpire for any reason.
Rule 7.
Rule 7 is all about the game coming to an end. Yeah, you thought the rules would only apply before and during a game? No way, Jose Reyes. A game is only a regulation game if at least 5 of the prescribed 9 innings are played. A game is forfeited to the opposition if a team employs tactics specifically designed to shorten or lengthen the game, or if they refuse or are unable to put 9 players on the field for any reason.
Rule 8.
Rule 8 has to do entirely with umpires, specifically their qualifications, the process related to them receiving appeals and calling on them, and the places that they should and shouldn't stand on the field. Like rules 1 and 2, most of this is pretty irrelevant because the shows don't care that much about the umps. One thing I am going to say about this is specifically related to qualifications, and that is that the Pesto brothers are not qualified to be umpires. The Deuce should not have let them be umpires, even in an unprofessional clinic setting. They have absolutely none of the game knowledge required to be an umpire. All they do as a team is cause mischief. They can't run the game in the way it needs to be run, okay? Neither of them have the handbook. That's something to note. And also, once he said they could be umpires, they started trying to throw each other out of the game, which I don't remember either of them being designated umpire-in-chief, and only the umpire-in-chief is allowed to remove umpires from the game. Pestos can't be umpires. I'm sorry. Well, not them, those two specifically. Maybe Jimmy Pesto Sr. could be an umpire. I don't know. He's got a bureaucrat in him. I think he could. Jimmy Pesto Sr. could be an umpire, I think. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he's qualified.
Last chance to earn my love, guys.
Rule 9.
Rule 9 has to do with the official process for scoring a game, which, despite reading its 40 pages of regulations, I did not find a single show grossly violating. This is mostly due to shows not really depicting scorekeeping.
So boring. I'm done with this.
And even when they do, sometimes they aren't even properly tracking runs and hits, much less batting averages, errors, RBIs, etc. So, honestly, I'm just overlooking Rule 9 negligence. Like, I just don't care. I don't fucking care anymore. Fuck it, dude. No one violates Rule 9. Sure, whatever. Here's the good news. That's all the rules. That's all of them. Just 9. There's just 9. Easy peasy, dude. Are you kidding me? Who would even think this was going to be hard, man? There was only 9 rules. Duh, I bet this... 9 rules? I bet that takes like an hour to read tops. With all 192 pages, and the rules and subsections of those rules, and comments related to the subsections of those rules accounted for. Let's take a look at the damage here. In the 50 shows that I examined, I had a total of 305 violations, which averages to about 6.1 per show. Most shows fell into 1 deviation from this mean, but there were 2 outliers. One of these outliers was the show that violated the most rules. With a whopping 16 violations, it is one of my childhood favorites. It is Wacky Races.
Competing for the title of the world's wackiest racer.
Which is fucking astonishing, by the way. Because all of the violations happen in less than 2 minutes of baseball. 16 violations in less than 2 minutes of baseball is insane work. The racers weren't even like playing baseball properly. They were just posing as baseball players to avoid a run-in with the cops, which, by the way, is a common baseball episode theme. For some reason, baseball episodes constantly have characters at odds with cops. I'm not complaining about it. ACAB. That's dope. But like, the biggest problem is that even shows that were playing pretty standard baseball games were still frequently violating the rules. Like, just left, right, and center. My Hero Academia, BNA Brand New Animals, Batman, The Brave and the Bold. They're all just playing normal baseball games, and they are still managing to rack up over 10 violations each. I get it that you have superpowers. Superpowers don't mean you get to ignore the rules. Stop it. I came to a harrowing realization that the easiest way to avoid violating the MLB's rules is to not play that much baseball. Generally, the more interesting an episode is, the more rules it's violating. BNA, I already mentioned, their baseball episode is one of the best I've watched, like bar none. And it still manages to violate 12 sections of the rules, which is me being generous, honestly. Because in all of these shows, I didn't count multiple violations of the same rule or separate violations of multiple subsections within the same rule. I genuinely cannot fathom how many violations BNA would have racked up if I properly tracked every instance of violation, rather than just being like, did violate this one, didn't violate this one. Fooly Cooley's episode, in contrast to BNA, only has one violation, and it's for goddamn helmets again. And I don't think it's a wild leap to say that BNA having 6 times more baseball on screen than Fooly Cooley is part of the problem. If you need even more proof of this hypothesis, though, here's a little tidbit for you. There were 3 shows out of the 50 that did not violate a single rule. One similarity of these 3 shows is that none of them really had baseball being played. Seinfeld, House MD, and the Brady Bunch. Each of these shows had less than 30 seconds of baseball on screen. Seinfeld doesn't even have a goddamn baseball show up on screen the whole time. The less baseball you play, the better your baseball episode is, in accordance with the rules. There's something wrong with the system, because that can't be how we're deciding what the best is. I know that's not true because I watched all of these baseball episodes, and Seinfeld's episode is garbage, man. It's so bad. It's so bad, and it can't be one of the best. It can't make podium finish, okay? That's ridiculous. I love House MD. The Brady Bunch is fine, I guess, like, whatever. Seinfeld's episode, The Boyfriend, cannot be one of the best baseball episodes. And according to my criteria, it is one of the best, because it violates no rules. So, yeah, so we're going to rethink this a little bit. I'll be back. And then we're going to do this is going to be a 2-parter. This one will be a 2-parter, I guess. Hello there. I'm back. And this time I'm wearing clothes that aren't sanctioned by the MLB Rulebook, because I'm cool now. I'm sitting on my chair backwards, and I've transcended the need for regulations and arbitrary subsections. After finding out that every single baseball episode was unfaithful to the MLB's very clearly stated rules, other than a few shows that I really don't want to talk about right now, I had to go back to the drawing board on why exactly baseball episodes even exist, because that was what drove me here in the first place. So, since bureaucracy didn't work, I'm trying the next best process, which is mathematical analysis. A recap, since it's been a little while since I filmed the first half of this video. Most baseball episodes have the characters of a non-baseball show put into a scenario where they are playing baseball for one reason or another, and usually it's in a heroes versus villains format. Given this, it's not a stretch to say that most of these television episodes are gonna have characters playing baseball on screen. Obviously. Which means someone could, if they were so inclined, timestamp every second that baseball is being played and then calculate the amount of time in each episode's respective run times that baseball is taking up. And if someone did do that, they could call it TSB for like time spent balling. And so I did that for all 50 of the episodes. Most baseball episodes and TV episodes in general are around 22 to 25 minutes long, though there are a decent amount of them that are more like 45 minutes. It depends on if they're a half hour or 1 hour TV block. Overall runtime doesn't matter if I use a percentage though. So I decided that 15% was pretty fair. Most shows have an intro that's between 1 and 2 minutes, and I figure you should be playing baseball at least 2 times as long as your intro is playing, so 15% fits pretty well. Unfortunately, though, some episodes don't even reach the 10% mark, much less hitting my 15% criterion. Seinfeld, touted as the best baseball episode by only bureaucratic idiots, doesn't even have a baseball appear on screen at any point. 0 minutes and 0 seconds of time spent bawling. It's only touted as a baseball episode because Elaine's new boyfriend is baseball legend Keith Hernandez, who's playing himself. My beloved House MD also failed me stupendously, only having one pitch thrown, which took up only 25 seconds of its over 40-minute runtime. After running the numbers for all the shows, I created this graph, which depicts all the shows TSB as their left bar and the percentage of the episodes spent playing baseball on the right bar. The shows are organized from lowest percentage to highest, irrespective of their TSBs. This is why Star Trek Deep Space Nine is roughly in the middle of the graph, despite its baseball episode Take Me Out to the Holosuite having the largest TSB score observed at 21 minutes and 1 second, or 1,261 seconds. By the 15% metric, 40 out of the 50 shows are true baseball episodes. Of this group, there were 9 shows whose episodes were made up of over 50% baseball playing, though. So I used these 9 as the pillars with which I cracked the code on what makes baseball episodes important. I used them to create 7 categories that every single baseball episode falls into at least one of. So here they are. The first category I'm going to explain is actually in the 3rd spot from the left, but it serves as a buffer between the ineffective and effective categories of baseball episodes. This buffer category isn't particularly good or bad, it's just kind of fine. Like, they're a 5 out of 10, they're fun, but they're not important or incredibly memorable. Welcome to filler episodes and episodes that are just for fun. Sometimes a baseball episode is used by a show as a funny scenario to put characters into. And that's it. Like when Naruto harassed a mailman that one time. It's just a bottle episode, and that's it. The notable example for this category is Dragon Ball Super's baseball episode, which pits Goku and friends against Universe 7 in a battle for superiority that is a baseball game. That's right, the protagonist with over 25 forms settles a dispute with baseball. I'm fine with it, I guess. The game's a chance for Champa to best Beerus and vice versa, but more importantly, a chance for Yamcha to shine, since he is, by all metrics, easily the most skilled baseball player of either team. That is not a joke. Yamcha doesn't get to show off much, though. He's just kind of comically beaten up throughout the entire game, eventually ending up incapacitated in a crater in true Yamcha fashion. The other characters also kind of make note of the pose, and honestly, it's a pretty funny bit. I did enjoy it. It's not serious, though. We aren't going to learn a lesson from it, but it's fun, and it's a baseball episode. And that's sort of just this category to a T. Fun and baseball. Good enough. Some shows, while technically having an episode that fits the baseball episode definition, are home to episodes that just really aren't a baseball episode. They feature baseball but don't really use the sport as the vehicle for moral growth or fun that we all know it can be. They're missing the spirit of baseball. The Pokemon anime has a character who's named Casey, after Casey from the poem, which later became a song, Casey at the Bat by Ernest Thayer. And Casey is a huge fan of the baseball team, the Electabuzz, who apparently win infrequently, which I assume means that she's like the Pokemon universe equivalent of being a Mets fan. This 12-year-old is my grandfather, dude. Like, she loves the Mets, dude. Are they going to win? No, but she's going to fucking watch the Mets, man. My grandfather has canceled plans multiple times because he was worried he might not be able to watch the Mets game. We love and support a loser. Love a pathetic team. Shout out San Jose Sharks. Other than Casey hitting some balls from 3 pitching machines to foil Team Rocket, there isn't really much that connects this episode to baseball. House MD's Sports Medicine is a pretty similar case, since the only thing really making it a baseball episode is the fact that my beloved Gregory has a patient who's a professional ball player, who, by the way, did not use steroids. He didn't use any drugs.
Oh no, you don't trust me.
He doesn't use drugs.
I'm clean, man. No steroids, no nothing.
Okay, he doesn't use steroids, he doesn't use drugs, not even weed or alcohol, man. He's clean. Source, trust me, he's telling the truth. Okay, how's that for a source?
Quit the hard stuff.
He didn't use drugs.
I just needed to relax.
It was drugs, believe it or not, it was drugs. For the shows in this group, Even if we're actually seeing baseball played in the episode, which we aren't always, we don't really learn anything from the experience. Baseball is essentially just there in passing. This category's characters don't even play enough baseball to be considered filling space. Remember, this category is lower than the category likened to the Naruto mailman episode. This category is called Precocious Child Who Should Not Be Playing Baseball is a Winner. These shows almost always feature a child that is gifted in one way or another, who often is the show's protagonist and namesake. Unfortunately, almost none of these children are gifted at baseball, so they use their talents from other areas in order to win baseball games, which they would otherwise have really no business competing in whatsoever. You can call the South Park kids whatever you want, but you gotta respect their abilities as grifters, rage baiters, and bullies. I cannot think of any other fourth graders, real or fictional, that Eric, Stan, Kyle, and Kenny don't dwarf at being the absolute worst. This little querulous quartet sucks. Regardless of this, though, they made it to their state's Little League championship despite attempting to lose every single game. Jimmy Neutron takes that and one-ups it, using tech-infused bats and gloves to carry his friends to the Little League World Series, and Gene Belcher uses his abilities as a performer to successfully hit a baseball one time, which appears to pale in comparison, but you should have seen him before the Deuces Clinic. They aren't all equally successful, but all of these kids are playing ball in a way that shouldn't work. Somehow it does, though. We've covered the ones that aren't really about baseball, kindergarten charlatans, and the ones that are just for fun. It's time to start taking this a little more seriously, though. Which is just to say, like, now we're going to get into the categories whose episodes are, like, actually good and that I think are worth watching. I've watched way more than 50 baseball episodes. I don't even think you should watch 50. That's already too many. But if you're going to watch any, just watch the episodes from the categories I'm about to say. And honestly, the filler category too, because like those ones are a lot of fun. So those are good too. Anyway, a show with deeper narratives being overshadowed by the joy and whimsy of a baseball game. This one's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm only going to give you one sentence as an explanation. A lot of baseball is being played, but the events transpiring in the background are way more important than the strikeouts. That's it. A great example of this is The Magic School Bus Plays Ball, an episode where the Magic School Bus plays ball. Specifically, though, it's about physics, and Miss Frizzle and class enter a picture of a baseball diamond from a textbook using their transforming bus. But on this diamond, the forces of friction don't exist. So Ralphie and the class struggle to play baseball without friction and ultimately end up leaving the book having learned some cursory information about friction-related physics. Despite the entire episode's setting being one of two baseball diamonds, it really takes a backseat to the show's plot, which centers around the value of inventive hands-on learning experiences in order to disseminate knowledge to a class of children as diverse as they are enraptured with Miss Frizzle's methods. Baseball's fun, but the value of the hands-on learning is really the takeaway of the show. So, I mean, I guess technically, if you think about it, these ones aren't really about baseball either, but at least the game is there for a purpose. Even if that purpose is just to distract us from the activities brewing in the B plot. Deeper narratives. The one thing standing between Earth and a bomb-loaded satellite is an unathletic child's ability to hit a baseball when only given one swing. Sounds like a horrific set of circumstances, right? But, you know, that is exactly what happens in Fooly Cooley's baseball episode, Furikiri, or Full Swing in English. The Fooly Cooley episode Satellite Crash is a great example of something whose outcome should not depend on baseball. Specifically, it shouldn't depend on baseball in a best-of-one context with an untrained player. Other things that BO1s shouldn't decide include, but are not limited to, whether the United States gets to invade isolationist Japan, whether your friend's soul is trapped in a doll resembling their image, and whether a militaristic strike force from outer space is allowed to enter the barn that a group of galactic war criminals is currently using to harbor a person who previously was a scout for the same organization who sent the strike force. And by the way, your strongest player is going to split in half to play for the Strike Force's team because she's from the same race as the Strike Force. And that race, rubies, are used almost exclusively as dispensable soldiers and bodyguards because they're one of the lowest ranking gems in Homeworld's very strict race-based caste system. I think we can agree that's pretty intense, right? And the circumstances are raising the stakes in a game that, most of the time at least, is being played as a joke in the first place. The shows in this category aren't really interested in the fun that comes from baseball, instead using the game as a coliseum for their characters to duke it out in. But there's a dissonance between the gravity of what the characters are doing and the stakes that they're doing it for. It's not baseball being used to mask deep themes. It's a haphazard at best connection between the two. Baseball, for some reason, is the solution to a much larger problem, or the method by which we're going to progress a deep theme in these shows. I don't know why it's baseball, and it doesn't really feel like it needs to be, which is kind of a theme that we're going to move on to with the next category. We're really just building on this category with the next. I'll preface, like, the next category's big case study show is about spousal miscommunication in the context of a baseball game. So King of the Hill's Take Me Out of the Ball Game puts Hank Hill in charge of a company softball team for Strickland Propane, which he recruits his wife Peggy to pitch on. Peggy was already a great pitcher in her own softball league, though, whose prowess earns her the respect of Hank's team immediately. Strickland starts lauding her as the reason that the team's winning, and Hank gets jealous because they're not giving him credit, and he becomes overly critical of her, so she loses her cool and becomes unable to pitch in the big finals game against the villainous Thatherton. Throughout the issue of Peggy losing her pitching and Hank trying to coach her through it, Hank ends up learning that Peggy doesn't like playing with the Strickland team because Hank had never watched her play softball until he was doing it as her coach.
Because you've never come to one of my games.
Peggy, you know that Tuesday's my night to drink beer in the alley with the guys?
So he takes himself out of the game to finally watch Peggy's pitching as her husband for the first time. This is the classic baseball episode storyline of character leaves the game in order to learn the true meaning of baseball, which is also the name of this category. This storyline also notably makes an appearance in the baseball episode of The Simpsons titled Homer at Bat, which gives us some A-tier sound bites, by the way.
I picked Ken Griffey Jr. Aw, jeez. Okay, I'll take Millhouse.
Unless, of course, my 9 All-Stars fall victim to 9 separate misfortunes and are unable to play tomorrow. But that will never happen. 3 misfortunes, that's possible. 7 misfortunes, there's an outside chance. But 9 misfortunes? I'd like to see that. You, Strawberry, hit a home run.
Okay, Skip.
I told him to do that.
Brilliant strategy, sir.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine and BNA Brand New Animals also have a character leaves the game to learn the true meaning of baseball. But they don't really officially fall into this category because they accentuate the final category more. They make more sense in the final category. And it's my list, so I'm going to put them where I want. The BNA episode in question is called Greedy Bears and shows main character Michiru as a casual watcher of her first Anima City baseball game until suddenly she's pulled into the game by the player of the Bears team after throwing a ball back into play really well. Classic. The episode follows her using her transformative animal powers to carry Bears from being a winless team all the way to the championship game, pretty much single-handedly. All the while, the coach of Bears, Dante, is shown to be under the thumb of a mafioso-style gambling ring called The Family, which is getting mad about the potential profit losses they could suffer from viewers correctly betting on Bears to lose, because baseball is all about sports betting. It's not really about the baseball in this city. It's all about the sports betting. Pretty topical. This video is sponsored by FanDuel. No, not really. The episode culminates in viewers finding out that the coach was the first Beastman to ever play baseball in the human professional baseball league. Dante's career was cut short, though, since he attacked an umpire and catcher, succumbing to the repeated insults and Jim Crow-style anti-beastman segregation laws that weren't affecting any of his teammates or opponents, only being enforced on him as the lone beastman. Suddenly, the coach who's seen getting wasted every single game and trying to lose is no longer a pathetic weirdo, but a decades-long victim of racism and subsequent manipulation by a family of the secret elite. Dante's pretty much a story of what if Jackie Robinson hadn't been able to rise above all the hate. What if Jackie Robinson had failed? This depiction of baseball as a tool to circumvent racism is less common than most of the other categories by a pretty large margin, but is also seen in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which pits Vulcans against inferior emotional life forms like Klingon, Ferengi, and humans. It's a category you don't see as often, but all three examples of it that I've seen so far were done in a way that feels considered, tasteful, and honestly steeped in a joy that only overcoming intense adversity can inspire. These episodes make a statement on, yeah, racism is bad, of course, but more importantly, are touching on the ways that disenfranchised groups can come together and thrive despite the abject negativity that they're facing. Whether it's an alien learning the meaning of joy by transforming into a black baseball player and befriending a cop, who is played by my GOAT, Jesse L. Martin, by the way, or Benjamin Sisko's team being happy despite losing to the Vulcans, these episodes turn baseball into kind of a glue. You can't change who you are or how you were born, but you can experience community and joy regardless of your circumstances. And I think that's part of why there are so many versions of the sport that we know as baseball, right? Like, there are fictitious examples like Blurns ball, Sniffle ball, and cricket, plus a bunch of real-world modified versions of the game like stickball if you're playing in the streets, or fungo if you're playing in the streets and changing some rules, or vitaya if you're playing in the streets and changing some rules and from a largely Dominican neighborhood. Shout out Kingsbridge and my neighbor Manuel. No matter what version you're playing, though, it's all baseball, and the game doesn't discriminate in the ways that people do. Before moving on from this category, there is a really important distinction that I do want to make. These shows use baseball to circumvent racism, not solve it. In none of these episodes are we getting a resolution to the systemic social or economic consequences of racism. The Roswell Greys literally get attacked by the KKK in the X-Files episode. Oh, and also, by the way, this is what real allyship looks like actively being anti-racist.
That's what I'm talking about. Move straight over the top. Come on, straight over the top with it. Oh, yeah. Come on now. Over the top. Come on, hit. Come on, get the guns. Get the guns.
Just like Pepsi, baseball alone can't fix racism. If it could, the real world would have been cleansed of racism years ago. Like, between Fernando Tatis Jr. and Shohei Ohtani of the present day, and then Barry Bonds, Yogi Berra, Sammy Sosa, and Benny Rodriguez Garcia of the past, we've had plenty of sluggers that weren't West European. Baseball doesn't solve racism, but these episodes depict it giving marginalized groups an avenue towards happiness, which is also important. Circumventing, not solving. It's time to finally answer the question that began all of this. Why do baseball episodes exist? After all the reading, math, and categorization, here's my final definitive take on the question. The game of baseball is so widespread that it's easy to co-opt into television without having to really explain all the rules, right? This means that shows can use it as a fun way to put characters into a situation that feels novel while not being out of touch or unrealistic with the world that their characters exist in, right? Even the most stringent form of baseball, the MLB, has a lot of wiggle room through its 8.01c ruling. I didn't do a great job of showing it, but it does. Every umpire has authority to rule on any point not specifically covered in the rules. So, since the umpire in Samurai Champloo allowed a dog to play, that isn't a violation of any rules, and that dog can play baseball. And this dog can drive. Trunks is allowed to use key blasts while playing the outfield as well, since the Angels, serving as umpires, decided that the rule book doesn't say you can't use energy to knock down a ball, which is true. It doesn't say that anywhere. The game is adaptable to different supernatural worlds, but it's also a touch point that people, regardless of their cultural background, can connect to and find joy in. Even if while you're playing, the principals of your school are discussing your execution because of you being the vessel to an ancient genocidal sorcerer or something like that. Which, by the way, like, what 15-year-old isn't the vessel to a genocidal ancient sorcerer? Like, cut Yuji some slack. Baseball is sometimes fun, sometimes just a filler plot, and sometimes a medium for connecting with the people we surround ourselves with. It's some, all, and none of these, depending on who's playing the game. Baseball episodes are important because they're a chance for writers to explore a situation that their show's normal setting might not allow for, or they're a way of continuing to develop ideas that a show has already established, but in a new situation. Baseball episodes are effervescent, emotional, enigmatic, exciting, and other words that begin with E. 3 strikes may mean that your time at bat is over, but it also means that you can return to the dugout and keep spending time with your friends. And that connection is what baseball episodes exist for. That is their grand purpose. That is why baseball episodes exist. And that is where the actual video ends and where the credits roll, though. Because, dude, sometimes you're on a team with your enemies. I don't want to hang out with my enemies in the dugout, or your coworkers, which, depending on your work environment, is worse than hanging out in the dugout with your enemies. Like, I don't run into my enemies that often. Okay? I'll be honest. I see way too much of my coworkers already, though. Like, I don't want Joyce as my shortstop. She can't even schedule a meeting in Microsoft Teams without help. I can't trust her to nail down a ground ball in a bottom of the ninth double play situation. Okay? That's a fate worse than death. And I don't think that's an overstatement or hyperbolic to say. Okay? I'm going to use rap. I'm going to use rap to make English appealing to 11th graders because I'm cool. I'm the cool substitute. Put on a double ear flap helmet. Why don't we just put the helmet on, you know? Why don't we just put on a double ear flap helmet, you know? Keep everyone safe today. You are a walking violation. Fucking shit's not sweet. Put on a helmet. Francine, you think you're hot shit? Put on a fucking helmet, dude.